Hi everyone, it's lovely to see you today. My name is Helen Buckwell from Hidden Strengths Learning, and we're here today to have a session with you looking at hybrid working and the future of work. My background's in leadership development and executive coaching, and at Hidden Strengths Learning we focus heavily on how we create a collaborative environment and work in a number of ways to try and create that. So I'm delighted to be with you here again to build on the session that we did back in the summer time. So let me hand over to Jude to introduce herself.
Thanks, Helen. So I'm Jude Sclater. I've been an executive coach for over 10 years, originally training at Deloitte before leaving to be a freelance coach. And my business, Think with Jude, is very much influenced by people like Nancy Klein and the theories and the thoughts around how do you create the environment for your coaches and for people to allow them to do their absolute best thinking. So Helen and I have lots of synergies in the way that we think and work. So it's really great to be working together again.
Lovely, thank you, Jude. So we wanted to get going and get you straight off really thinking about things. And Jude, I know you were going to talk us through the objectives, so let me just pull up the slides.
So the way Helen and I like to do things is we like to make this a collaborative conversation. So please make full use of the chat. If you ever want to say something out loud, feel free to take yourself off mute. You can always use the hand up function as well, especially if we start to get a few more participants coming in and we're on double screens. It will just help us see who wants to make a comment. But today, really, what we wanted to do was to give everyone a moment to stop and reflect on what's happening in the workplace right now, how things might start to shape up, especially with talks now of some organisations saying we're definitely going back into the office, other organisations very apprehensive, and then people in the middle looking at something that it's much more of a hybrid type of model. So we'll explore how we show up as coaches in the face of a lot of these changes and challenges. We'll talk a little bit about what some of the coaching tools are that we might be able to use or adapt to support the leaders that we're coaching and to encourage that collaboration within organisations, and then consider what the future of coaching might look like in this hybrid world of work. I don't know about you, but I know I'm feeling a little bit reluctant to be going back into the city, back into people's offices. So I've gotten quite used to this safe sort of Zoom bubble, and yet there is a part of me that really wants to get back in front of my clients in person again. But we'd really like to kick off by getting a temperature check of where you all are at the moment. Helen, do you want to lead us into what's going to happen next?
Yes, absolutely. So on this screen, we've got a whole host of different images. And in a moment, we're going to get you to go into breakout rooms to have a conversation about how you're feeling right now. But to spur your thinking and to give you a moment of reflection, we'd like you to look at these different images and think which pictures sum up for you how you as a coach are feeling right now. We've all gone through the last year as well. Today is a momentous day with the gradual lifting of lockdown measures, so it's very real. But how are things feeling for you right now? So just pick one or two images there that really resonate with you, metaphorically, of course. And if you want, take a photo of that screen, because when you go into those breakouts in a moment, you won't be able to see those photos. Okay. So just give you a moment to look at those, take your choice. I'll bring it back in a second. I'm just going to go to the next slide and then I'll bring it back. And then what we'd like you to do is in a moment, we're going to get you into small breakouts, and we'd like you to share the photo that you chose and the 2 or 3 words that sum up what that's about for you, that sum up how you're feeling. And what we thought is we'd use Slido. So if you go to slido.com and put in this number here, and again, feel free obviously to photograph this slide. We'll put it into the breakout room as well in a moment, so you have that message. And you can add your words in there. And just to highlight, we're not asking you all to agree on your set words. We're just asking you to have a discussion, share your words, and then put your words into that Slido, and we'll build up a big word cloud just to see what the mood is of the group right now. And then really importantly as well, having done that check-in, we'd like you to share what you're noticing, what you're hearing with your clients, about the future of work, this thing that we're calling hybrid working. What's the mood? What are you noticing already? And we'll draw on those experiences when we come back into the main room afterwards. Okay, so I'm going to give you about 6 minutes or so to have that conversation. Let me go back to those photos in case you want to look at that. And then if we can start the breakouts, that would be grand. There's the question for you again. So the words that sum up the picture and your thoughts on the future of work. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Here we go. We started to get some responses through. Nice to have you back in the room. And do feel free to carry on typing those in. Hopefully you can see that word cloud. Can I get a nod for a minute? Yeah. So we're seeing some words coming through. And I'm very conscious as well that obviously we've got a global audience with us this afternoon, and the world is still a very different place in different countries, and we're having highs and lows in different environments right now. So I haven't asked you to put in which country you're from as well, obviously, but there may be a bit of a mix of what we're experiencing. You know, speaking from a UK perspective today, some of our restrictions are lifted. The weather looks like it's going to be crazily warm for March, and we've got a long weekend coming up. So there may be some more positive vibes than there may be in some other countries that are having a trickier time at the moment. But the biggest word that seems to be coming out there is curious, opportunity, and excited. And I suppose, could we have predicted curious with a group of coaches would have been one of the biggest words? Perhaps we could, but that's wonderful to see that we are curious about what the future might bring and what that's going to look like. But equally in there, obviously, we've also got some trepidation, some terrified. That's a lovely word, lighter, that someone's put there. Possibilities, but equally fuzzy, anxious. So we've got a bit of confusion, a bit of tiredness, and a lot of curiosity, I think. So we can carry on letting that grow and progress as we go through. So Jude, did you want to?
Yes. So now we'd love to hear some of the thoughts you now have around how the future of work is changing. So if you can type your thoughts into the chat, or if you would like to prefer to speak out loud, then please go ahead and do so. Otherwise, I'll let us take a moment so that you can gather your thoughts and get them into the chat. It's great to see some thoughts coming in already around having to renegotiate psychological contracts. And I'm seeing a lot more recently around psychological safety and how leaders can start to re-establish that. Seeing some things in there about, you know, discussions are not necessarily about the next normal. It's either you're in the office or you're going to be at home. Discussion about more autonomy going on as well. So seeing things coming through around resilience, around that excitement, around more flexible ways of working. There's more demand for coaching in the education sector coming up. People have changed their view about what's possible, and employees now want more choice. And it's really interesting to be seeing in the news what some of the big organisations coming out are saying. I can't remember, I think it was something like Goldman Sachs chair in the US was saying, you know, working from home is the antithesis of collaboration, and so that's not going to be their way. They're going to want everyone back in the office. My husband, who works for a stock trading firm, they're very much sort of talking about, well, September is probably what we're looking at. And I know other organisations are thinking much more about a hybrid model. A consulting organisation I coach for have gotten rid of their office and they've moved to a WeWork facility because they want more flexible collaboration spaces. So just seeing some of the other things coming in to the chat. Still a lot of this greater diversity in working arrangements. There is the themes coming about how do you manage this hybrid work and not showing that favoritism towards those in the office versus those at home. And I know, you know, if you'd asked me last year, I would have said either everybody has to be in the room with each other or everybody has to be on Zoom. I was quite black and white about it. But the fact is that that's not always going to be possible. And I know there's going to be a challenge around how do you get technology to catch up with having some people in the room and others in lots of distributed places. Helen, have you got any points that you want to jump in with just before I take us to the slide?
I was just going to draw on that point and ask Nick about that. Nick, who mentioned how to manage that hybrid and the pragmatism piece. What had you seen so far that's spurred that on? Do you mind just picking on you, Nick?
Yeah, I just did some reading, some research, and I wrote about this. And it's, you know, if leaders and managers are back in the office, their natural inclination is to focus on those people who are there present with them. Working at home is easier. Completely working at home is easier. Completely working in the office is easier. But how do they make sure those people at home are not disadvantaged when you're having meetings, for example?
I mean, I agree. The same dilemma has been going through my head, and I've worked, I don't know if any of you have noticed this, but a number of people I've been working with who have historically been viewed as being in a kind of satellite office, in whatever form that might be, have found the last year amazing, because the equality of access to being heard and contributing in meetings when everyone's dialing in, suddenly, rather than them being the only one dialing into a meeting or one or two, everyone's doing it, and so everyone's voice has been equal. And I know a number of them have been worried that when things flip back, will we maintain those lessons, and what do we do about that? I mean, some of it, I've been chatting to some clients about just simply coming up with your top 5 new meeting etiquettes when you've got half in and half out kind of thing. There might be some really practical things that we can help our clients work through some of these dilemmas, but we really wanted to set the scene of what we're starting to notice. Shall I put up the slides, Jude? So we
can... definitely. And just while you're doing that, Jacqueline Hill, if I can come to you for a moment. You've made some really good points about how do you manage those coming back with long COVID and the guilt of returning to realise that a number might not be coming back because of redundancies post-furlough. I just wondered if you had any further thoughts to expand on that.
Yeah, I work mainly in the international development sector, in the charity sector, because of the complete falling off the edge of a cliff of all the funding. There's massive restructuring, massive redundancies going on. And I don't think we yet know how many people will retain their jobs post-furlough. And that doesn't just apply to the sectors I work in, that I think apply that across the board. Similarly, the people I know with long COVID, it feels very similar to me to the experiences I've had with ME, that total unpredictable nature of energy levels and things, and how organisations are going to manage that. I think they're going to be faced with quite a lot of issues that they perhaps haven't anticipated in this focus on, do we do it from home or not? It's this, you know, it's going to be one of the smaller issues, I think.
Yeah, exactly. And I just saw in there as well, Matthew Cross talking about, you know, this change to the new normal isn't going to be as rapid as the change where we all suddenly had to work from home. So it was quite a quick change, and this is quite a slow moving change. It's going to be different in every country, in every part of every country as well. So some of the things we noticed when we ran this session last year, and a lot of these things are still true today. So I think fatigue and drops in resilience are becoming even greater. So you had a lot of people that were coping really well, but with a lot of successive lockdowns, you've got parts of Europe now going into the 3rd wave and yet another lockdown. If you're working in a multinational organisation, you know, not everyone is in the same position. And I think people that were coping very well at some stage are now starting to get more tired and starting to see that their resilience is dropping off a little bit. And so I know talking with people in HR, it's getting a little bit better, but there still is a reluctance to take leave. People are still holding on to hope, and you can see it in the UK, for example, in the papers. It's just, you know, every other day there's a story about some kind of holiday hope and hope for the summer and things like that. So you can kind of see that it's reinforcing this thought of, well, let's hold out. Isolation, I think, is the other one that seems to be increasing a lot more as well. So in some senses, we're on screen all the time, all day, back to back, but we're still all in our own homes. And that sort of gentle banter and chat that you'd normally have, you know, everyone's talking about, you know, between meetings and things like that, that kind of stuff is not happening quite so much anymore. And I think the overwhelm as well, not just that our leaders are feeling, but that lots of people are feeling. So I suppose what Helen and I were thinking about is this sort of led us to some themes about some of the things that we're curious about for the future. And I think technology is a really big one. It has such a big role to play in equality of opportunity, in the new habits such as meeting layouts, meeting etiquette and things like that. Then starting to think about us as coaches. As I was saying before, I'm a bit reluctant, I think, to go into other people's offices. So how do we manage our coaching? What does that mean for our pricing as well? And what are the fears or the things that we might be bringing into a coaching session, and how might that be influencing the way that we coach some of our clients? I think office layout is a big one. Sort of people want to go back to the office but don't want to be cheek by jowl as they might have been before. And I think there's a big thing around the boundaries. And I know I've been working with my clients around initially the working from home was a chance to reset your boundaries, to try and get those in the place that you want them for when you go, if you decide to go back into the office. But actually it seems that a lot of our boundaries have been very much eroded in the back-to-back sort of online meetings, working longer hours, really giving a lot, and especially with leaders that now they're doing even more in pastoral care than they would have before. And then also having to lead their organisations and keep the business afloat so that there is a business for people to come back to. So these were some of the things that we were curious about, and I'm sure they'll start to come up as we further discuss. Now over to you, Helen.
Thank you, Jude. So we wanted to help you now engage with this further and think, if that's the context, if this is the world that we're living in, and you know, we've got loads in that chat, which is brilliant. And Nick, just to build on your last point there, personally I agree, wouldn't it be wonderful if this led to some creativity of thinking differently? And I guess it's to that end, what's the role that we can play in helping our leaders do that, rather than just flip back to how it was or assume it's one or t'other? What could be the art of the possible in the middle of what we might create over the coming months and years? And so as coaches, what role can we play in helping leaders to get through this and think about this right now? And we thought it might be helpful if there's frameworks or tools that you've started to use with your leaders on this topic, that again, we could share some of that best practice. We've got some ideas of our own as well, of stuff that we've found helpful, but it would be glorious if we could share some of the lovely work that you're doing as well. So to that end, we're going to get you back into some breakout groups. We've got a clear shared view of the kind of backdrop that we're now tackling over the coming months, years, however long it may take. And what can we do to help? What's our role in that? So how can we help our leaders, and what tools might be available to help us? So we're going to get you back into those breakout groups. And then again, we'll do the same. We'll use the chat and we'll pick on a few people if you're up for being picked on. Hi, everyone. Nice to see you back. Right, okay, so what we'd like to do in this, to try and be cunning in how we use the chat so we can really see the themes that are emerging, is could you use the chat box to put in your thoughts for the first question, so the run around how we might be able to help our leaders, but just hold back on the tools and the frameworks for a minute, and then we'll ask you to stick those in a sec, because it's just easier for us to all see the themes that are emerging when we're looking at those, the chat box. So let's just open that up, and then like before, if it's okay, as things start popping up, we'll see what anyone thought and get a little bit of a conversation going. So Sue saying areas to help us: exhaustion, yet how to get back in the boundaries, resilience, mental well-being, fear adaptation, and if it'll work. I agree, that kind of that change. The thing that's really struck me is that we've been going through huge quantities of change throughout all of this, and we're maybe, as much as it's not normal, this way of life, we're kind of in the swing of it now, and then we're about to have this new messy emerge. Suze, is that something you've been noticing, that kind of fear of going into the unknown? I'm just trying to find Suze on my screen. Are you there?
I'm here. It's actually Aisha that had said that. So
sorry.
It was Aisha that I was in the group with that had said that, so I'll let her speak.
Around. Does she fancy sharing her thinking? Is she there? Okay, maybe not. I'll carry on. Aisha, if you're there.
I'm here. Yeah.
What have you noticed?
Together with Suze, we noticed that people are, leaders are exhausted, and our common conclusion was that we need to share our coaching skills and train leaders also some coaching skills so that they can self-coach themselves and then help others, because coaching is a long journey, and then they need this on their recovery phase. And the other idea I would like to share is, I just suggested and discussed with Suze, I am planning to, for example, form a LinkedIn group for the coaches who are passionate about to help leaders, so we can exchange our ideas about how to help leaders and their teams through our collaborative design and skills. So it's just exchanging ideas. So that was the idea.
No, that's wonderful. Thank you, Aisha. And I would, so wonderful if we can create that extra community there to share. Is absolutely. And I would agree, you know, we definitely, I'm hearing so much about that exhaustion and the need for support in how they can help themselves now about ongoing. And definitely, you know, an article that I saw in Harvard a while ago that really resonated with a lot of people was this thing that we put an awful lot of pressure on our leaders, and perhaps, you know, we should also be asking more of team members to step up. And how can leaders do that? You know, they've taken on an awful lot of weight of not just doing their job, but the worry about the wider situation and being there for everyone in their team. And how can we encourage team members to collaborate and support each other more, rather than heavily relying always on the leader from a resilience and well-being perspective? And Gadir, I don't know if I've said that right, apologies if I haven't, but I love your thing there about helping leaders to focus on forward thinking, not just the now, and managing the day to day. Do you fancy saying a bit more about that? Apologies if I said that wrong. Too many.
Yes. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yeah.
So basically, the businesses have been focusing really on business, day-to-day business every day, just surviving during this time, just staying alive. And you know, part of our work as coaches is to help them be able to split their time, you know, the way they think, and have some forward thinking about what's, you know, staying ahead of the curve, so that they not only survive, but they thrive.
And have you found leaders have an appetite for this, or is there exhaustion getting in the way?
There's exhaustion, but I think it makes them hopeful. It makes them, you know, I felt that it kind of makes them hopeful, really.
Yeah. And to me, there's some links there with what Nick was saying earlier about being creative. You know, what is that art of the possible for the future, rather than just looking back at how it used to be or what we've had to go through. Absolutely. We've got another one here: create safe, supportive space for them to think creatively about the future. So Laura, sorry, you were mentioning the same thing there, and then creating that safety to pause. What else have we got here? Exhaustion, especially amongst women and those with disabilities. Oops, it's jumping, sorry. Office space. Yeah, again, absolutely. That exhaustion point, continual, and from non-white ethnic backgrounds. And what do we do about that exhaustion? Have you started to see or tried any things to help these leaders to recover? I'm curious as to any thoughts on how we as coaches can help them in this moment of exhaustion. Any thoughts? Bit of a big question to ask. I'll carry on looking at the questions. And then create safety, we've said that, and we'll look at that in a moment. So let me just come to the slides then. Do chip in if you wanted to share any further thoughts.
And there are some, so people have put some pieces in around what to do to help with the exhaustion. So Gamze saying mindfulness, Sue's talking about helping people have a listening, reflective space. Lindsley talking about helping them work with strengths and energy management, and Nick talking about helping them to utilise the expertise they've hired but haven't chosen to use. I think on the energy management, I recently went back, there's an HBR article called Manage Your Energy, Not Your Time, which was written way back in, I think, 2010 or even 2007. It's a little bit outdated when you look at the things it talks about nutrition, but everything else in there is still quite spot on. And it's a really great, I was talking about it with a client recently because it resonates a lot that time is finite, but from a physics perspective, energy is not. And with time, you can only do so much with it, but energy it really transformed the conversation that I was having with my coachee, and she was able to come up with some other things, other ways of managing her energy in a different way. And I see Lindsay is recommending a book there, The Power of Full Engagement, Manage Energy and Not Time. So and the other one I just wanted to pick out in there is I saw a few of you talking about vulnerability as well. And when we're thinking about also creating much more inclusive organizations and a more inclusive culture, vulnerability plays a really big part in that ability to be able to tell people, I've made mistakes, or I'm not sure what's going to happen next. We're going to have to do this and work on this together. And that's something that I think is quite important to work with some of our clients, especially those that are in those leadership positions that need to balance that. I suppose that need to balance the being able to be vulnerable to really build that trusted and inclusive environment, at the same time being able to look like there is some direction that they do kind of know where the business is trying to head to, even in uncertain times.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that energy piece, I totally agree. And for me, the energy piece really connects to the strengths as well, because we know that obviously if you're using the strengths, that feeds the energy. This is a summary here, thank you, Jude, of some of the things that we had thought of when we've been discussing this and reflecting and looking at the work and what we've been hearing. So some things to explore, which I think really resonate with what you're saying. So psychological safety, how to role model those collaborative behaviours, helping leaders think about how they do that. So if we're going to, really involve the wider group within an organisation or amongst a team or across peers, how can we help our leaders think about how they, draw others in to help them rather than feeling like they're an island on their own needing to do this? So how do they role model that and create that collaboration? That word curious, just like in your word cloud, how they try and give full attention to people so that, again, when they make those choices of where to place their attention, they're getting full value from it. Strengths, those kind of really looking at valuing the difference in teams, again, in order to help them look right now at drawing in so many different perspectives and getting that diversity of thought. And we've put demonstrate appreciation there. This is a big thing for me. I've been banging on about it loads over this time. I think in connection to that isolation, how do they show appreciation and gratitude to others around them, which when we're feeling exhausted can be really hard. But we know that team members have been often struggling without those little clues, those little hints that, oh, well done, or that went really well, the little conversation when you leave a meeting. So how can they be more conscious about demonstrating that appreciation and gratitude, even if they're feeling exhausted themselves, because that will boost others, and that's a nice way to use our energy, which can be energizing in itself. So let's move on. Sorry, I just jumped incorrectly there. Let's move on to the next piece around tools. And if you could start putting those into the chat box now, the ideas that you had there, and I'll stop sharing and we'll see what came up there for all of you.
Yeah, so I would love to just hear what are some of the tools and techniques that you've seen being used, you're using, you're interested in using, that might help us with our clients at this time. Starting to see some of the tools being used, team coaching, coaching conversations.
Google Jamboard, what sort of?
Yeah, Gadia, can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Oh, you're on mute.
Yes, Jamboard is basically, and I don't know if I'm understanding what tools. Do you mean tools, electronic tools that we're using, or that's what I meant by Jamboard?
Yeah, no, that's absolutely all kinds of tools. So great to hear everything.
fine. Jamboard is basically a tool that they can use to, and the team who's on the meeting can put things on Post-its and put them, so it's kind of like a big whiteboard where everybody brainstorms together and puts things on Post-its. It's really a fun tool.
Fantastic, thank you.
Thank you.
And Francois, can you tell us more about self as instrument?
Yes, it's just simply about using what we know as coaches and decide in the moment, depending on the context of the client. So I think the best way is just to be present with the client, and then everything will follow. So tools are great, absolutely. It depends on the client and the context.
Wonderful, thank you.
You're welcome.
And Sue, I see you've put in logical levels there. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Hi, yeah, it's a very sort of simple, very powerful tool, sort of drawing on what Francois was saying there about sort of being present as a coach, but also helping the client to maybe resonate with one of 6 key headings. And that's very useful around change, where people can get stuck in change. And so the top level is purpose, although I have seen some with vision as well. So it's purpose, identity, beliefs and values, capabilities, behaviours and environment. And it's really helping to understand where on those headings, if you like, people are feeling that they may need some sort of support in moving on and then going up to the next level.
Fantastic, thank you. And I've seen some people talking about a lot of focus on strengths and visioning, which I think is fantastic. Demetrius, are you okay to tell us a bit more about the redefinition tool by Timothy Galway?
Yes, okay. Hello, everybody.
Hello.
So with the redefinition tool, you are trying to identify a current to provide the current definition of a concept, and then you are trying to provide a new definition in line with the current situation we are in. If you do that several times, you might see that you might get ready yourself to start seeing things differently, actually. And you might find the direction to where to change, start changing.
Fantastic, thank you. Yeah, I really like that as an idea. It's a bit like, is it the Gestalt practice that you need to explore the stuckness to get out of the stuckness? Something kind of similar to that. So thank you so much for sharing all your tools. So seeing people using things like Microsoft Mural, which I think sounds a bit like Jamboard, and I know there's another one called Mural, which sounds similar to Mural, but it's spelled a little bit differently. Some great book chapters and things there. The At My Best Strengths. Paul, if you've got a chance to put that link in, I think that's the Marcus Buckingham free strengths report that you can do at the moment, that he's giving away 1,000 free reports a day. I know I've suggested that to quite a few people as well. So Helen, if you could just move the slide on one. Oh, here we go, brilliant. So these are some of the things that Helen and I use. Oh yes, great to see someone's brought up the immunity to change as well. Shivanji, thank you. I know I've done a little bit of work with that and found it really useful. Actually, I often use some of their terminology when you're talking to people about boundaries, that it's a bit hard to use this terminology at the moment, but a bit like you're a virus in the system and people are going to try and fight you off because you're trying to do something different. So you've really got to get to the root of why it is you want to do this thing differently. Otherwise, the system will beat you back, and it will be hard to sustain that change. So just some of the other ones that we thought about, we've got up on the screen there, and we're going to go through a couple of them in a little bit more detail. So Helen, I think you were going to kick off with the first one. Yeah.
So the first is the collaboration formula, which is a tool that we've developed at Hidden Strengths Learning, which, as the name would suggest, is there to help leaders and team members think about how they collaborate more. And we thought we'd throw this in just because it really takes account of the context and the culture within which people find themselves. And then the idea here is simply that we have the leader who's leading the team or the project or whatever it might be, and their awareness of their own behavior and their mindset, all the stuff you were talking about just now in terms of their own well-being. And then in these brackets, we have how do we help the teams to have clarity over what their goals are, their purpose. Even if the future is uncertain, how can we help them have some clarity, some certainty over the next month or so, or how things might be working, where they should be placing their energy. Plus connection, so how do we help the team members to collect, have quality conversations, you know, have disagreements, share learning, make the best decisions that they can at this point in time. And then efficiency, what processes do we need to have in place? And this, for me, is a thing that we've kind of created some processes and efficiency in our new way of working, perhaps not always intentionally, but over the last year they've emerged. And I'm working with clients to say, well, as we go into this hybrid world, how can we be more conscious about what we want these to look like, rather than just kind of, you know, getting through like we had to last time when we were in such a kind of crisis management mode. So the idea is that the team can, with the leader support, work on these aspects of how they're working together. And if the leader is really role modeling and operating in the, you know, a way that encourages those behaviors, then ultimately we see increased performance. So as we look to the future, how can they role model and help teams to respond to this new moment in time to step up to the challenge? So that's one that I obviously will selfishly put my hand up and say I use a lot, but I share it in case it's of use with anyone. And then we also wanted to bring up the transition model by William Bridges, or your chosen change curves. I know there's loads out there. Personally, I really like this concept of, you know, how do we bring it to people's attentions that this may be slightly more of a subtle change than we experienced back this time last year, but nonetheless, it is going to be a significant journey over the coming months and year. And we're going to have to say goodbye still, perhaps, as everyone really let go of how we used to work back in January, February 2020. I'm not sure. And how do we start to say goodbye in order to move into this neutral zone where we can be more creative and innovative? So again, I know when I work with clients, this can be really helpful to help them check in on where they are now and what they might need to do to start moving into the next phase of this journey. And then the final one that has been brought to my attention, which is from the mental health first aid course in the UK, is this concept of the stress container. And if you like this idea, there's a lovely little video on YouTube around this that they've developed. And the idea, again, drawing on the well-being, resilience, all those things we were talking about at the start of our conversation, is we have a container within which we put in our stresses and they flow in. And for each of us, that will be a unique size and unique things that go into that. And if it overspills and overflows, that's when we start to see some of the behavioural changes where we might be snapping and more irritable and clearly entering a state of stress. And then we have this tap here. And if we're in a healthy state, we have healthy coping mechanisms which allow us to undo that tap, and then that lets some of the stress out. So that might be exercise, sleep, nutrition, etc. Or we might have some unhelpful coping strategies which block the tap and stop that from happening, which might be, you know, not getting enough sleep, not managing our work boundaries, so we're not checking out at all, drinking more, whatever the thing might be that is our thing that we do. And so that doesn't help us. And I know a number of clients who have really found this metaphor to have in their mind as a helpful one to help them if it's feeling like the world is becoming a bit too much. And then Jude, you had a couple more to look at.
Yeah, and I just wanted to, Paul, thank you so much for sharing that link. I actually had it wrong. So he's talking about the online version of these At My Best Strength cards. And that's sort of actually coming into these next two that I'm talking about that might be helpful. Is there are a number of things that we used to kind of do in person that have moved online. And during my supervision that I had, one-to-one supervision last week, my supervisor did some constellations work with me over Zoom, and got me up and moving around the room, and she just assured me that it didn't matter that she couldn't see me, that as long as she could hear me when I needed to say things out loud, and as long as I could see myself, then that was absolutely fine. And I think a lot of the constellations work is very much about helping people get outside of themselves and to be able to look at the entire system objectively and work out what might be going on in that system that's impacting the way that they work. So I think this is something that if you've been doing it with your clients is still possible. I even have some buttons that my supervisor sent to me, so sometimes I do the buttons work rather than the walking around kind of work. But the other thing might be just also where we might be using that with ourselves. I think Francois mentioned somewhere in the chat about, you know, as coaches, what might we be bringing into a coaching session that's going on with us? And this is why I also quite like the work of Abudi Shabi, working with the body in coaching. And he goes through the 6 steps of, if you want to use bodywork more in your coaching, how do you go about doing that? So the first step is really, and I've started thinking about this more, you know, if you're going from a meeting into your coaching session, or from coaching session into coaching session, and your client is doing the same, then you're both bringing things in with you. You're in a state where you may not notice some of the subtle changes. So I try, even just for 5 minutes, even 2 minutes, just to pause for a moment, and I just note down what are the things I'm noticing in my body already. Because if I've brought it in with me, then that's my stuff. When I notice changes in me, there's a greater opportunity or greater chance that that's something that's going on with my client. So I'm finding that really helpful, just having that moment of tuning into myself, and then tuning into what I notice about my client when they arrive, and what do I notice in myself when we start to engage. And again, that might give me some clues around what's going on with the client, what's going on in the system, and what might be going on with me that might be coming into my coaching that I need to either use or rein back. And then you just keep noticing what's going on with you and the client. I've been doing a lot more of, when I see a bit of an expression or you know, an eye roll or a kind of a shake of the head or a bit of a smirk or something, I actually now pause and check in on that. And I'm finding so much more richness is coming out of asking my client to tell me what was going on, what went through their mind in that moment, and looking at how their voice changes or pace changes, that sort of thing. You want to keep being curious throughout the entire session, and so for us, we already know we're pretty brilliant at that. And then there's the piece around us as coaches being brave to share what we're noticing and ask what it might mean for the other person. This one I'm still working with. I can do expressions and things like that, still not quite brave enough to feel something in me and perhaps share that with my client. So that's something I'm personally working on. But this last one, number 6, this is the one I'm finding is helping enormously. You're coaching someone on screen who's been on screen in this position all day. And one of the things Abudi talks about is that when you change your state, and this is kind of what happens in constellations work, isn't it? Or those of you who might coach while you're outside or while you're walking, that when you change your state, you look at things from a different perspective in a different way. And I had a client I was working with a few weeks ago, and she was kind of sitting forward like this and talking about how the conversation that she needed to have to move down to 3 days a week at work from 4. She's recovering from a long-term illness, and she just was getting stuck and she couldn't find a way to do it. And I simply just said to her, I noticed you're sitting forward like this. Just want you to try something a bit crazy with me. Might work, might not. She said, yep, let's go for it. And I said, I just want you to sit back in your chair in a bit more of a relaxed posture and just tell me what you're talking about again. Just say it to me again. And it was phenomenal how different what came out was. And then I asked her what she noticed about that. And she said, oh, there's so many more possibilities because I could do this, I can do this, I can do this. And I said, and that was just from you changing the way you were sitting. We were still in front of the computer. So I suppose what I'm, my encouragement to all of you, and also my encouragement to yourself, is yes, we're in this little box, but we're not actually trapped by it. And many people do have the ability to stand up and walk around, and we have the ability to do that as well. So those are some of the things I've been playing with as well.
Lovely, thank you, Jude. And I'm conscious of time, so hopefully we've got a number of different ideas there and building on your own as well. And I know this is being recorded, so you'll be able to access all of these different ideas as well and add them to your own. What we'd like to do for the final few minutes is get you back into a conversation so you can think about all of this stuff and think about, well, how do we ensure we look after ourselves in amongst all of this? Because building on what Jude just said there, we are part of this, right? And we can help shape and influence things consciously or otherwise. So how do we look after ourselves? And especially as we go through what might be some very challenging times for our clients. And in addition, from all the different conversations we've been having today, what would be the one key thing you'd like to take away to have a play with or experiment with? So if we can quickly go into breakout rooms, we might just make that, I don't know, 4-5 minutes, something like that, just a quick chat to think about how you look after yourself and the key takeaway, and then we'll come back and wrap up. Over to you.
Wonderful. So we just to help wrap up today, we'd love to hear some of the things that you're taking away. So if you could start popping those into the chat, or again, if you want to say them out loud, then please feel free. Helen and I were just talking about how we're loving all the different ideas that you've given us. I'd completely forgot about things like immunity to change and logical levels as tools that you could potentially use. And things around visioning as well. Actually, I think that's something that I underuse. Helen, what about you?
Yeah, I agree, and I had as well the feelings wheel, which I like that, and I think it would be good to bring that out on the table a lot more to get people to work at a more emotional level. And sometimes, I don't know about you, but I always say, how are you feeling? And I get someone's thoughts, and then I say, how are you feeling? And I still get what they're thinking. So to be able to present that framework is always helpful, but particularly at this point in time. Visualization, I love using visualization, but I have to say at the moment, if we were all asked what the vision for the future would be, it's a really hard one right now, isn't it? But it would maybe drive some conversations over how we feel about the ambiguity as well, and how we show up in the face of that. So how are we doing in chat? And we'd love to hear those actions as well that you're wanting to take. Any takeaways?
So we've got some things around the mental health first aider courses, thinking about managing your energy, not your time, being in the same boat, and we're together, and we do have paddles and things like that. Some things around the vision of how you want to be rather than what you want to do. I really like that distinction, actually. So how do you want to be rather than what you want to do, I think is absolutely lovely. Well, thank you all so much for your time and energy today. It's been so much fun just hearing from you all. I love being around other coaches. Helen, any last thoughts from you before we hand back to Nicola?
No, other than thank you again. Thank you for all those comments. Nick, thank you for your article there that you've written around the new normal. I should definitely check that out. And I completely agree there with Banu that slowing down and taking a pause, we need to slow down to speed up, and perhaps it's been hard to slow down a bit over the last, well, I guess for some of us maybe it has, for others it's been a bit of a frantic time, but I hope wherever you are in the world that you're able to carry on focusing on this and look after yourselves, and let's just work through the ambiguity together and carry on those conversations.